Thank you so much for watching Outnumbered Overtime. You can catch me at 4 p.m. with David Asman on the Fox Business Network. In the meantime, the Daily Briefing with Dana starts right now.
Fox News alert: President Trump not backing down in a speech moments ago from his stance on immigration and separating children from their families at the border. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. The president blasting his critics on the immigration agenda, which lawmakers from both sides of the aisle say they want to see changed.
Polls have created a massive child smuggling trade. Can you believe this? In this day and age, smugglers know how the system works. They game the system. They game it. It's so easy for them.
All this as lawmakers grill the Justice Department watchdog, about his report on the Clinton email investigation and explosive new details on day 2 of the IG's testimony. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live on Capitol Hill. Catherine, I know that you have more information on this than anyone, so we go to you for an update.
Well, thanks, Tina, and good afternoon. We're in the 4th hour of the public testimony, and the Republicans have stated very clearly today that they believe political bias at the FBI impacted both of the presidential campaigns.
They prejudged the outcome of the Hillary Clinton investigation before the investigation ended, and these exact same FBI agents and attorneys prejudged the outcome of the Russia investigation before it even began.
For a second day, lawmakers are drilling down on these anti-Trump text messages that were exchanged between FBI agent Peter Strzok and FBI lawyer Lisa Page, and specifically this newly discovered text message from August 2016 where they discuss stopping Trump. One lawmaker wanted to know whether it was part of a broader conspiracy.
I wonder who the we is and the we'll stop it. Who do you think the we is?
If we can go through a couple of them, or the broader, or a broader group beyond that.
Democrats have said consistently that the Republicans just simply cannot accept that after multiple investigations and reviews, there simply was not the evidence to prosecute Hillary Clinton for mishandling classified information.
All their howling about lock her up was bogus. It was baseless. It was unsubstantiated. And now we have another report saying so. But again and again, the Republicans refuse to accept this conclusion.
One of the more interesting headlines we've had in the last hour and a half was an exchange with Congressman Jordan and the Inspector General Michael E. Horowitz, and it was over that August 2016 Stop Trump text. What we learned at the hearing is that it was provided to the Justice Department in May, and the allegation is that the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein sat on that text message or didn't immediately provide it to Congress, and we're reaching out to the Justice Department to get their side of what happened and what explains the apparent delay with that text.
Right.
Dana.
And then just a quick question. I know that Peter Strzok, through his attorney, has said that he does want to come to Congress to testify. Do you have any indication as to when that might happen?
Well, this is a very fluid situation, but based on our latest reporting, he's indicated that he is willing to speak voluntarily to the House Judiciary Committee. He does not require any kind of immunity agreement, and it could be within a matter of days. I would not rule out by the end of this week or sometime next week, Dana.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, we'll stay tuned and keep in touch with you. Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Senate Republicans are working on a solution to the family separation at the Mexican border. And Senator Ted Cruz is spearheading the Protect Kids and Parents Act. It would double the number of federal immigration judges to approximately 750, authorize new temporary shelters, require immigrant families be kept together, and require those who meet the legal standards to be granted asylum within 14 days. President Trump says that's not enough.
We don't want judges. We want security on the border. We don't want people coming in. We want them to come in through a legal process like everybody else that's waiting to come in to our country.
Joining us now is Republican Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, and thanks for joining us. I know that this is going to be the topic later today on the House side as the president will make his way to meet with House Republicans. But whatever the House decides to do also needs to be able to pass the Senate. And what do you think the prospects are for that, sir?
Well, I think this is a good first step to be able to walk through the process to be able to figure out how to solve this. This is one of several issues the administration has raised for a long time, and quite frankly, in February, this was one of the things that the Senate voted on. We got bipartisan support, but we didn't get 60 votes on it, and a proposal that the president came up with that is part of this, what's called a Flores agreement, trying to be able to solve this. So we voted on this. I've had folks say, this is new. This is not new. We voted on this in the Senate, but it just didn't get 60 votes to try to solve this then. We need to be able to bring it back up and be able to solve it now. This is a bad trap the administration is in. They either have the choice of fulfilling the law and actually holding to the law, or having families be separated on that. That's a bad choice. That previous administration just said we will just ignore the law. This administration said we're going to abide by the law.
But they did choose to try the zero tolerance policy, which is why it's all ramped up since April, right? I mean,
it is that's the big
discretion
change.
There.
There is some discretion, but go ahead.
All right, let me just read to you from David French of the National Review, because I think this makes a lot of sense. He said about Congress, if you can't pass legislation permitting families to be held together, then you're a servant of the executive branch. Yes, activists are right when they say that Trump could stop family separations tomorrow if he wished. But the best check on the president isn't hashtags or press releases or think pieces. It's the check the founders designed, an active Congress exercising its lawful authority over immigration in America. The president sounded a little frustrated today that at least with one of the bills, perhaps he was referring to Ted Cruz's idea about immigration judges and trying to deal with this one particular issue might not go far enough. But is it something you think that could actually get done? Because you might not be able to get the other things that the president wants. And for family separation to stop, you have to do something on the congressional level.
We do. The administration has some ability to be able to have some flexibility. For instance, they could give the option to be able to say voluntary return. It's when charges are filed, you actually have the separation. If you give the families the opportunity to do a voluntary return, then you could expedite that process. They could return as a family, stay as a family. In the meantime, though, I think Congress does need to respond to this. This is something the president's asked for a year and a half now. This is something that's been a problem with the legislative branch and executive branch since 1997.
Right.
So this needs to be resolved, and I do agree that Congress has to act on this. That's why it was in the February bill. That's why it needs to be addressed now. But we need to also deal with border security. We got to deal with DACA issues. All those things have to be resolved.
Yeah,
but in the meantime, let's do this small slice.
Right, and there's one other thing I think that some people would like to see addressed, and that is the asylum claims. I understand that Congressman Meadows is going to introduce legislation that would try to alter the way that people are granted asylum, what they have to prove, and how expedited that might be, and how you deal with children from all countries, not just a few. Would you support revising those asylum standards?
Well, the key thing, I'd have to look at his bill to see it, but the key thing we have to do is have a faster process to go through on the asylum hearings. Right now, about 30% of the individuals that request asylum actually are granted asylum. That was true during the Obama administration. That's true during the Trump administration as well. So about 30% of those actually have an asylum claim. The other 70% are sent back to home country. They've not qualified for it, again, during the Obama administration or now, either one. So the first things first, let's get them to trial faster. Let's get that hearing done so it's not 2 years before we get an asylum ruling even, and just release people into the country, which is the past policy, is just release them in the country.
Right. Let me also ask you just one other thing. Late breaking this afternoon is that Nikki Haley, the UN ambassador, has indicated that the United States will be withdrawing from the Human Rights Council. There was about 3 years during the Bush administration where the U.S. government pulled out, boycotted that council, but that's going to happen today, mainly because of terrible anti-Israeli bias. But there are other things as well. Do you support that idea?
I absolutely do support that idea. The UN Human Rights Council is headed up by some of the worst human rights violators in the world, that they're actually in the leadership of the council year after year after year. They're anti-Israel over and over again. That's their constant drumbeat. So I get it. We can try to be there and so we can be a participant in it. But when you're there, we vote no every time, and it just becomes a problem every time as well. So it doesn't seem to make a difference whether we're there or not there.
All right. Well, that announcement is expected at 5 o'clock today, so we'll have that for you on Fox News. Senator James Lankford, thank you.
Thank you.
Lawmakers on both sides blasting the administration over children separated from their parents at the border, while the president says he's got no choice. Plus, the Democratic National Committee changing its rules in a move that could stop Bernie Sanders from running for president in 2020. Former interim DNC chair. The battle over separating families at our southern border heats up as the White House digs in its heels, and lawmakers from both sides blast the policy as un-American. The president today saying that the law leaves him no other option.
We want to solve this problem. We want to solve family separation. I don't want children taken away from parents. And when you prosecute the parents for coming in illegally, which should happen, you have to take the children away. Now, we don't have to prosecute them, but then we're not prosecuting them for coming in illegally. That's not good.
I'm joined by Donna Brazile, former interim chair of the DNC and author of Hacks, The Inside Story. She's in studio because you're going to be on the 5 later, too, and I'm happy about that.
It's good to be in New York also. Thank you.
So this is what I thought I might do, and this just came to me in the commercial break. You and I first really got to know each other in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina. There was a tremendous amount of partisanship, in a way, and actual frustration by Democrats against President Bush. Correct. And you bucked the party, in a way, and you wrote an op-ed, and you came to the White House, and you took a lot of heat for that. Do you think that there are Democrats today that might be willing to do what you did to try to at least solve this particular problem?
Look, I think the only way we are going to solve a problem like immigration reform is to have Democrats and Republicans at the table. The border security, the ability to make sure that those who are here without papers, we need to have a path. We need to have a process. You know, I was pleased overnight that Ted Cruz has put together, I think it's called a Protect Kids and Parents Act, because there's simply no law that says we have to separate children. This is a policy decision that is happening now. So yes, the short answer is that Dianne Feinstein has a bill with 49 Democratic senators on board. Ted Cruz now have a bill. Ted Cruz, Dianne Feinstein, perhaps go back to Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Dick Durbin. There are ways to come together. We just have to be willing to take the political risks in order to make this happen.
Right. And the law says they have to be separated, but the policy is a choice for how to deal with it. And the president was trying to explain that today. But listen to somebody who is a 2020 hopeful on the Democratic side, Senator Cory Booker.
Right now, he should stop it. This is inhumane. It's abusing children. It's moral vandalism on our values as a country. He's attacking the very idea of what it means to be an American and assaulting the dignity of not just those kids, but assaulting the dignity of every American and what we stand for.
And yet, Donna, as partisan as that might sound in some ways, if you're on the Republican side of the aisle, if everybody wants to solve this, they have a chance to do it this week.
Well, I think, of course, there are 2 bills on the floor that will likely come to the floor in the House of Representatives, Mr. Goodlatte bill, and the one that the Speaker might be putting forward. They may fail. There's also something I think that the Democrats would like to offer that not only help out the Dreamers, but I do believe that the Democrats really would like to come to the table with the Republicans to work on this. But the president needs to understand, policy-wise, we should stop separating children from their parents.
Let me change subjects, and that is that the DNC has made a decision about how to deal with the future. And you know, I'm for strong parties. I think that the parties should be strong. The Republican Party, the Democratic Party. This is better, I think, for our system of government. What happened at the DNC that changed things that might affect Bernie Sanders?
Well, first of all, the DNC will be meeting this summer in Chicago, the 50th anniversary of that famous year in 1968. We will consider what I call a litany of reforms to strengthen the party, to expand the party, but also in the long term to strengthen. And one requirement is that if you're running for a delegate or running for president, you have to be a bona fide Democrat. That's simple. The party will vote on it. I don't see it as a controversial measure. I see it as a measure that says that we would like to strengthen the Democratic Party, but we will also vote on measures that will open up the party, same-day registration, allow more people to be involved in the caucus process, but we also want to help build the Democratic Party.
And so how do the Bernie bros feel about that?
Well, you know, we will have an opportunity to talk more about it when we meet later this month as well as next month. But at this point, I think this is about strengthening the Democratic Party, making sure that we have an open party that allows people to come in, to register as Democrats, whether they come in the day before or the day of the election.
And did the party already do away with the superdelegate process?
Well, come on, Dana. How much superdelegates? I mean,
look, I don't want to take you out of a job.
Please don't take me. It's not a job. It's really a mission for activists to be involved. No, we are looking at various reforms to limit or reduce the number of superdelegates. I believe that superdelegates, like every other delegate, needs to be part of the what I call part of the pie. We might not be the cream on the top or the crust at the bottom, but we should be part of the process.
Part of the filling?
Well, in my judgment, I'm more
blueberry.
Apple
pie. All right. Donna Brazile, you're going to stay right here because Senator Mitch McConnell is at the podium after the policy lunch. Let's listen in.
Cruz and others are working on it as well. And so we hope to reach out to the Democrats and see if we can get a result, which means making a law and not just get into some kind of sparring back and forth that leads to no conclusion. So let me, with that, turn to Senator Cornyn.
Well, I agree with the majority leader. That's what we want to do. We want to keep families together. Some people have suggested the only way to do that is to not enforce the law, which I believe is a false choice. We can both keep families together while we expedite their ability to appear in front of an immigration judge and present their claim for an immigration benefit on a short time table. And then if they do qualify, then they get that benefit all that much sooner. As you know, right now there's a big backlog of immigration cases. But what we would do is move these families to the head of the line. In the interim, they would be in a humane, safe, and secure family facility. And hopefully we'll get this problem addressed right away. My hope is this is not going to be something we're going to do over a matter of weeks and months, but something we could do in a matter of days, hopefully this week.
Well, as the leader and the whip have said, we had a very good discussion, spirited discussion about this subject at our luncheon today, and strong agreement among Republicans that we need a solution that enforces the law and also a solution that allows families to stay together. I think we all agree that the immigration system is broken. I think we all agree that a secure border is really important, something that many of us have been advocating for a long time. It's something that we've been trying to get our colleagues on the other side to work with us to achieve, so far unsuccessfully. And I think we all agree that we need to enforce our laws in this country. And I'm hoping that, as has been pointed out, that the Democrats, at least this time around, will realize that the best solution, the best path forward is to work with us in a bipartisan way to create a new law, as the leader said, that addresses this problem and gets us to a solution and not just a political talking point. This is a real issue with real consequences. It's a function and a byproduct of an immigration system that's been broken for way too long. And that's perhaps a discussion that will happen another day as well. But in the near term, we need a solution that specifically addresses the problem that we see on the border today. And our members are in a very serious way working together to try and come up with that in hopes that those on the other side will work with us to make that happen.
This week is the 6-month anniversary of the president signing the tax cut law into effect. And as a result, you take a look at what the country is thinking about this.
All right, that's the Senate majority leaders. They are out there talking after their policy lunch, mainly talking about the issue of the day, which is how to pass legislation, and if they can, to deal with the issue of separation of families at the border when they're coming across illegally. Donna Brazile is still here with me, and I appreciate that. Now, what you hear is that there's a lot of agreement. Right? Even Democrats say we don't want this policy anymore. But what I want to ask you is, because you know the House very well.
Correct.
The House often will pass legislation that can't pass the Senate.
Correct.
What do you think is going to happen this time?
I think they're going to pass a legislation that will not get through the Senate. The Goodlake bill, 414 pages, include a lot of provisions that I think Democrats will not support. And I also think the more moderate bill that Speaker Ryan is proposing, again, some of the provisions are onerous. They will not deal with the separation of children.
Like it would have to be an amendment.
It would have to be an amendment. Look, the bottom line is that there's no law that says you have to split these children apart. This is about asylum. And how do you treat people who are trying to come across our border seeking political personal asylum?
And also, I also think there's not enough discussion also about solving the problem at its source. You know, the drug cartels have figured out a way to make a lot of money. Not just on drugs, but on figuring out how to traffic people, human beings, and figuring out some sort of bipartisan support for the president to get him more resources, not just on the detention area, but also on law enforcement seems like it would be prudent. I'll give you the last word.
President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton, we can go all the way back. Border security has been one of those areas where we know we've had to put a lot of investments. But this one here requires border security. It requires us to use technology, drones, as well as making sure that we have the appropriate defenses at the border. This is a comprehensive solution, not just what I call a piecemeal solution.
All right, Donna Brazile, you working on your one more thing for later?
Oh, yes. This is a good one.
Stay tuned. All right, Donna Brazile, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Josh Holmes is a former chief of staff to Senate Majority Leader McConnell, and Dave Brown is a former senior advisor to Senator Patty Murray. So I'm glad that I have you here because I want to tap into your expertise from a tactical standpoint. Because the president wants something done, the House Republicans want something done, and maybe not everyone is agreeing, but they have to pass something that could get through the Senate, and it might not be comprehensive, etc. Dave, let me start with you. How would you tackle this problem in order to help solve the problem that everyone seems to agree they want to stop, which is not having to separate families at the border?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on, Dana. Look, I think there are two ways to address this. One, Senator Feinstein has a bill that I believe every member of the Democratic caucus has signed on to that would immediately cease the separation of children from their parents at the border and resolve this underlying crisis. So there's your 60 votes insofar as you have Democratic support for that bill. The other way that is a bipartisan and proven path forward is really what you saw in February when Senators John McCain and others came forward with a bipartisan bill that addressed quite a bit of what the president has said he wants in immigration reform. Not everything, but an important first start and clearly demonstrating that there is a path to get to 60 in the Senate.
So, Josh, I know that Senator McConnell just said, and you know him well, like he doesn't like to waste time. Don't bother him with things that are just going to be a lot of sparring back and forth. Bring him something that can actually get done. They're maybe not sure what the president would be willing to sign. How would you deal with this from the majority standpoint?
Well, there are a couple of things. I mean, I'll just react to what I just heard. The kind of a bipartisan approach that we talked about in February. Remember, Democrats actually shut down the government over this issue in February. So, I mean, the bipartisanship, particularly on the Democrat side,
Josh, can I hold you there for a second? Because your old boss is taking questions. We want to listen in to Senator McConnell.
Pause in the so-called zero tolerance policy while we move all work on legislation. Now that there's a legitimate effort to work on legislation, do you agree that there should be a pause in the policy for the near term?
Well, you can ask Senator Hatch about his. Well, I don't have anything to add to that right now. I think we need to fix the problem, and it requires a legislative solution. The president said that. We've said it. The Democrats have said it. We need to come together and fix it. Ed?
This would be a narrow proposal, but you've expressed your reluctance to have a broader immigration debate this year in the Senate. Is that still?
Well, my assumption is, in order to fix this problem, you can't fix all the problems because obviously we've wrestled with this issue for a decade. As you know, I went to it in February wide open for amendment. We couldn't reach agreement. This requires a solution. And I think, therefore, obviously, it would need to be a narrow agreement to fix the problem that we all agree needs to be fixed.
Senator McConnell, can you, sir, talk about some of your just personal observations of seeing the photographs, hearing the audio of the children at the border who are affected by this? And to what degree have you talked to the White House and the President about finding a solution?
Look, I've already addressed this issue. I think we've got a problem. We need to fix it. Everybody agrees we need to fix it, and we're going to work on that.
Senator McConnell, you have a problem with DACA. Congress needed to fix DACA. It hasn't fixed DACA. You have another very specific problem.
I don't know how many times you all want to hear me say the same thing, but we have this problem that's arisen. We all know it needs to be fixed. As I said to Ed's question, the only way to guarantee on an issue this complicated that we get a fix is for it to be a narrow solution targeted at this particular problem. Thanks a lot.
All right, Josh, let me go back to you. The panel's still with me, Josh Holmes and Dave Brown. Josh, you know, one way to get Senator McConnell to not tell you what he's feeling is to ask him how he's feeling about something. He's thinking about it, and he says he wants to solve this specific problem. So I think he's sending a signal for what he thinks should be done here.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to him very carefully, what he's talking about is a way to get to a solution here. And I think his conference is pretty united around the idea that this is not just a political issue, and this certainly isn't an issue that anybody can take advantage of. We have a real problem on the border right now, and children that are in an awfully difficult situation, and we've got to remedy it. And the only way, literally, we've been dealing with this for over a decade, the only way to get this done in anything close to a quick manner is to keep it as focused as possible and remedy the issue. So that does not, that does not at all encompass the challenges that we face on immigration. We do very much have a border security problem. I would argue that the most humane way to handle all of this is to make sure it doesn't happen in the first place. And that's what the president is talking about. But in the meantime, we need a fix down at the border right now.
On this particular thing.
Can we just clarify one point on this, though? I just got to jump in. I apologize.
Sure.
The reality is the president could solve this tomorrow. He has made a policy decision to radically depart from what the Bush administration did and the Obama administration did in terms of how they adjudicated these cases at the border. He made a policy choice, and he has eliminated prosecutorial discretion. So federal prosecutors now have to refer every single one of these cases and charge. And that's why you're seeing kids separated. So for the president, for Mitch McConnell, for any Republican to say, we've been trying to solve this problem for 10 plus years, that is so disingenuous.
Well,
and it's completely wrong.
Josh, there is a policy standpoint, but it is true that the Congress has abdicated its responsibility on a lot of things over the years, and trade being one of them. And we are not going to talk about that now, but if everyone is frustrated with this, and the president's indicating he's not changing the policy, he's not backing down from that, then the Congress, if they want to actually solve the problem, has the opportunity to do so here.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Trump administration has taken the novel approach of actually enforcing the law that's on the books. I know that's a foreign concept to an awful lot of Democrats and certainly those in the Obama administration, but the Trump administration sees it a little differently. Now, what it has created is chaos, and I think there's nobody right, left, or center that thinks that this is the intent of the policy. We need to change it quickly. We need to make sure that children are not put in a vulnerable situation, and I think that if you listen to the leaders just now, it takes a legislative remedy, and they're ready to act.
All right, Dave, let me give you the last word. Since you are the first time appearance on the Daily Briefing, we'll give you the last word.
Well, thanks. Look, I mean, I think Mitch McConnell needs to realize that the right way to do this and the way to get to 60 is to have an open process on the floor, allow Democrats and Republicans in the Senate to offer amendments. He talked about how in February the process fell apart. It's because he said then, I'm not bringing a bill to the floor to deal with the Dreamers. And he was never sincerely interested in actually solving immigration. There's a path forward. There's a path forward. 2013, when the Senate passed comprehensive immigration reform. Let's get back to the basics. Let's find a way forward to 60.
You know what? I'm going to let you two see each other in the green room afterwards. You can hash it out. All right, Josh Holmes and Dave Brown, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
President Trump is heading to Capitol Hill in just a few hours to meet with lawmakers on immigration and our own use of illegal immigrant children amid growing outrage over the policy prompting a surge in family separations. Jeff Paul is live in Tornillo, Texas. Jeff, you're on the ground there. What's the situation like from your eyes?
Well, Dana, we're less than a mile from the U.S.-Mexico border here in Tornillo. And behind us, if you can see off into the distance, beyond those fences, there's sort of a white structure. Those are the tents that the government has put up to house some of the teenage boys that have been moved here from the more permanent structures. They're trying to make room for the younger kids at those permanent facilities who are right now being separated from their parents. Now, a little while ago, 30 miles northwest from where we are in El Paso, demonstrators gathered to protest that zero-tolerance policy. Folks lined the streets for several blocks as they marched to a nearby detention center. Some chanted, "Free our children now." Others carried signs with messages reading, quote, "Humanity doesn't require a green card."
We're here today to let the children know that they are not alone. We are here with them, and we will continue to fight until the children are free.
Now, people who advocate for this zero tolerance policy have said in the past and most recently that if these families didn't approach the border in the first place, this problem wouldn't be here. Dana?
Indeed. All right. Thank you. Meanwhile, President Trump will be heading to Capitol Hill this afternoon to discuss immigration with House Republicans ahead of lawmakers voting on 2 bills. So what will come out of that meeting? Well, we're going to ask Bret Baier. He's the anchor of Special Report. He joins me now. Bret, it's kind of hard to believe that it was just a week ago that you were in Singapore at the North Korea summit. It feels like a lifetime ago. Take a listen to what President Trump said earlier today about asking Congress to give him the legal authority to deal with this issue.
What I'm asking Congress to do is to give us a third option, which we have been requesting since last year, the legal authority to detain and promptly remove families together as a unit. We have to be able to do this. This is the only solution to the border crisis. We have to stop child smuggling.
What do you think will happen tonight as he heads into that meeting?
I think he's going to be presented a few options to go forward and to listen to the Senate leadership on the Republican side, Senator McConnell, Senator Cornyn. There is this growing optimism that they can get a narrow legislative fix to specifically deal with the separated families problem, essentially allowing families who are seeking asylum or going through criminal proceedings to stay as a family and not be separated at the border, to enable them to tap into additional funds that have already been allocated so that they can have enough housing and support for the additional numbers. And I think they're saying that they could move that possibly even this week, which would be fast in Senate and Congress terms.
But do you think that the president will be satisfied with that and sign it if he doesn't get some of the other things that he wants?
No. I didn't say that. I think that.
And so are we back to square one?
I think that the president may be persuaded that this is what they need to do as a step in the process. Obviously, he wants the whole enchilada, but to get that done, to get that across the finish line, may take some time working out other issues that don't deal with this. And I think there's a sense on Capitol Hill that this issue has gained enough steam, and obviously the images and the people coming out of the woodwork talking about it have rattled a lot of lawmakers.
Yeah, I read today that the lawmakers from both sides of the aisles are taking a volume of calls that they haven't seen since Obamacare repeal and replace legislation was up there. So, and you're going to do your show from the Capitol tonight?
I am, and we hope to have a couple of guests up there, and if the president wants to swing by, he's more than welcome.
Yeah, you just had an interview a week ago.
He might as well throw it out there. I mean,
might
it
as
happened
well.
on the North Lawn.
If I were the president, I would want to come out and frame that discussion that he had just had with the members of Congress. I would want to be the first one to do that because you know that there are over 230 members or so that we're going to go out and they're going to try to frame it themselves. Can I ask you about one other thing? I want you to listen to an exchange on this IG report, the testimony being held today on the House side. Listen to Congressman Jim Jordan.
We have the text message right before it and the one that happened right after it, but somehow that one, the most explosive one, was missing from the pages that we got months ago.
And I can explain how we ended up finding it because it was missing from, we did not have it either.
So the
covered it.
department didn't give it to you either.
I don't think the department had it.
What do you think what do you make of that exchange and where do you think this is going next?
Well, I think that this brings up the issue of what has not come to Capitol Hill after the requests. And the IG is making the point that he was not getting it from the DOJ and that they found it kind of in a backdoor way through the IT system and mining, saying that the DOJ didn't even know they had it. We'll see if all of that matches up, but clearly there are lawmakers saying that the DOJ has slow-walked or even turned its back on providing all of the info that they requested.
All right, well, they're going to continue to hear from them, I bet. Bret Baier will be watching Special Report tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana.
A top Democrat calling out the Secretary of Homeland Security, claiming President Trump is holding children hostage. Senator Chris Van Hollen, 68 million people have been forced to flee their homes. A United Nations study now showing that includes more than 16 million migrants in 2017 alone. That's an average of one person displaced every 2 seconds. The vast majority of refugees come from underdeveloped countries, but only about 1/3 of asylum seekers spilled over into neighboring countries. Turkey remains the main host for refugees, taking in 3.5 million people, most of them from Syria. President Trump taking a hard line on illegal immigration, saying under current law, the administration has only two options.
We can either release all illegal immigrant families and minors who show up at the border from Central America, or we can arrest the adults for the federal crime of illegal entry. Those are the only two options: totally open borders or criminal prosecution for lawbreaking.
Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen is chairman of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, and he visited the border over the weekend, just returned late yesterday afternoon. Sir, while you were there, Senator Chuck Schumer was actually making some comments about this. Let's listen to those for a moment, and I'll have you react.
The president alone can fix it with this flick of a pen by signing a presidential order to end the agonizing screams of small children who've been separated from their parents. Mr. President, I'll lend you my pen. Any pen. You can fix it yourself. So we're here today to say, Mr. President, you should and you must fix this problem.
Senator, I'm curious about your visit to the border and also what you think will happen this week, as you heard Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell say that he doesn't want a lot of sparring back and forth. He thinks that this is a narrow issue that could have a narrow fix, possibly in days, not weeks. Your thoughts?
Well, Dana, I went to the border to see with my own eyes what was happening, and it did confirm my worst fears about this new policy of separating parents, moms and dads, from their kids. And it is a policy, as you know, that was put in place 6 weeks ago. The Attorney General released the memo, and as a result, you've seen a dramatic increase in the number of kids who have been taken from their parents. So Senator Schumer's right. I mean, the president does have the power right now to reverse the policy that he put in place 6 weeks ago. There are lots of legislative issues regarding immigration here on Capitol Hill. We should debate those, but we should not. And as a country, I don't think people want any policy that divides parents from their kids.
Well, and even the president said today that he doesn't want to do that, but that he does want to follow the law. And believe me, I understand the difference between the law as it was and the policy, but he's saying that he's going to be different and he's going to enforce the border security. And so if he's not going to budge on that, and Congress has it in its power to pass a law to get this particular piece of the puzzle solved, do you think that you'll be able to go along with that?
Well, certainly if there's a piece of legislation that results in taking care of this specific issue in a smart way, and we can get it through Congress quickly, which is very unusual, sure. I mean, I obviously have to look at the details, but if it prevents the separation of parents from their kids in a humane way, then we can do that. I mean, a number of folks have floated ideas. There's very little actual legislation except Senator Feinstein, who's put together a piece of legislation which I support. But as you know, the challenge is getting a very targeted piece of legislation through the process. And then the question is, what's the president going to do, right? Is he going to sign it or veto it?
Well, we might know more today because he's going to go up and visit with House Republicans. In the meantime, I did want to get your reaction to this. Secretary Nielsen yesterday at the White House talking about what the critics are offering as a solution. Listen.
Congress and the courts created this problem, and Congress alone can fix it. Until then, we will enforce every law we have on the books to defend the sovereignty and security of the United States. Those who criticize the enforcement of our laws have offered only one countermeasure: open borders.
You, as the chairman of the Democratic Senatorial Committee and focused on the midterm elections, I'm curious because I just don't know. Is there anybody in your caucus that is actually advocating for open borders?
No. And this is just a myth. It's totally untrue. I'm opposed to open borders. We should have strong border security. If you look at the pieces of legislations that have gone through the Senate in the past, they all have strong border security. That is not the issue here. The issue is the president's decision 6 weeks ago to break with practice from the person you work for, President Bush, and the succeeding administration, the Obama administration, specifically with respect to dividing kids from their parents. And And that is very different, and the president does have it totally within his power to reverse it. We can talk about other legislative proposals when it comes to immigration. We can and we should.
Well, I do want to ask one last question of you, sir,
Sure.
and that is that, you know, the root cause of this is not always being talked about in terms of how do we deal with that, and that is the drug cartels that have figured out a way to make a lot of money as a side business by human trafficking. And I know that's not the case for all of the people that are coming to the border, but certainly there are a lot of them. Do you think there would be bipartisan support or Democratic support to help provide more resources to deal with the law enforcement problem in countries to our south?
Look, we all want to make sure we track down on drug smuggling. In fact, while we were at the border control area just on Sunday, we saw one of the cars that had come across the bridge that had cocaine in it. So we need to stop that. But look, when you have moms with young kids coming across the border, they are not bringing drugs with them. I mean, they just have what's on their backs. They're fleeing from violence in Central America, and they should have an asylum hearing. There should be an asylum process that they can go through. And in the past, the family's been kept together to go through that process.
Would you support two things? One, more immigration judges to deal with the processing of asylum seekers, but also Mark Meadows on the House Republican side is going to introduce legislation that would make it more stringent, or basically revise the asylum process and what you have to meet in order to do that. Is that something that you would support?
So we definitely need more asylum judges. I mean, there is a backlog. I'm told that the resources have already been appropriated for asylum judges, but they haven't been hired yet. So if that's the case, they should start hiring them. With respect to Mark Meadows' proposal, I just haven't seen it, Dana. I can't comment on it.
Well, I know I kind of put you on the spot because I just read about it, too, in the commercial break. All right. Senator Chris Van Hollen, thank you.
Thank you.
Centers for Disease Control saying that smoking in the U.S. hit another all-time low. High taxes and smoking bans also credited for the decline, although there are still more than 30 million people lighting up. That's now only 14% of adults. That rate down from early 60s when 42% of Americans smoked. So there you have it. On Wall Street, stocks are taking a beating as a tariff dispute escalates between the U.S. and China. Fox Business Network's Christina Partsinevelos joins me with a closer look. Christina, what else is spooking the markets today?
A lot of it is just trade talk. It's the first time in a while you've had a president that speaks so openly with negotiations, and investors don't really know how to handle that. They're slowly starting to understand, okay, this is all going to be public. So you often see swings in the market like crazy. Today being an example because of this tit for tat going back and forth with China. You're seeing some major companies being hit. 3M, Boeing, Caterpillar, Boeing down almost 4%. Why? Because they are big companies, multinational companies that do business with China. And if any type of escalation happens, their costs could go up. And that means that their share price right now is getting hit because investors think, uh-oh, maybe this trade war could happen, maybe not, but still there's a possibility. So we're going to sell off the stock, which is why you're seeing some of the industries, especially industrial.
It kind of sounds like how we put together the news show. It's going to happen. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No,
yeah, your time slot's tough.
I'm going to ask you about this. There's a push to legalize marijuana, and it's catching on around the globe, and investors are loving it?
Yes. Stocks, the marijuana stocks, especially the ones that are coming out of Canada, they are just booming. And right now you have Canada that's going to legalize, or possibly going to legalize marijuana. They're really pushing forward. And then you also have movement in New York, too. So people, you have Prime Minister Trudeau that's pushing forward in Canada, creating a big market. Then here in New York, the fact that they're pushing forward with a commission to say adults should be able to smoke marijuana and not get charged, not go to jail for it.
It's a tidal wave of regulations that are going to change. And I don't like showing on television where kids can see all the paraphernalia, but I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah,
I think I'm a little old-fashioned on the issue.
It's going to happen, and the stocks are climbing higher. It could be a
Want me to get on board?
I don't know right now in the short term because I think markets are going to dip a little bit, so I'll hold off. But marijuana, yes.
Actually, I don't know anything about that either. So that's why we have you as our expert. All right, Christina, thank you. We'll be right back.